For many of us, checking our phone is the last thing we do before bed, first thing we do in the morning, during breakfast, on the toilet, in the car, during work, during school, hanging out with friends or family, walking the dog, waiting in line, feeling awkward or left out, procrastinating, and so much more. I'm Kaia Rae, and you're listening to Devices Divide, a podcast where we explore the effects of digital devices and screens on ourselves and society. Join me on my journey to better understand the implications of our relationships with technology, bringing awareness to the good, the bad, and the pixelated. Today I'm speaking with Jerry Mander. Jerry is an activist and author best known for his 1977 book, 4 Arguments for the Elimination of Television. After receiving his MS from Columbia, Jerry worked in advertising for 15 years, including 5 as partner and president of Freeman, Mander, and Gossage in San Francisco. Mander also worked with the noted environmentalist David Brower, managing the Sierra Club's advertising campaigns, and is now a vital part of the International Forum of Globalization based in San Francisco. Welcome, Jerry.
Thank you so much.
Is there anything you'd like to add?
Well, I was a lot more than that in advertising. I worked for 10 years in commercial advertising. And then 20 years in nonprofit advertising. So I did 30 years worth all in all.
Wow.
Or 28 years, something like that.
That's amazing.
We formed 2 nonprofit ad agencies after I quit commercial advertising. The first one was called Public Interest Communications, and the second one was Public Media Center. Those did only work for nonprofits.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Have you seen any links or similarities between advertising strategies and the way that media is being broadcasted now in devices and screens?
Well, there's a difference between advertising strategies and devices.
Yeah.
I see quite a few differences between that. I thought you were going to ask me the difference between advertising strategies for nonprofits versus advertising strategies for corporations.
Oh,
Big
yeah.
differences there, too.
Yeah.
Because for the nonprofits, you don't have as much money. So you have to be very efficient in what you do, and you have to get 20 times the response that you would get for a corporation, which can do it by mass. You have to get everybody really turned on.
Wow.
So it's a different style. Yeah.
First question today is, why did you write 4 Arguments for the Elimination of Television?
Well, that actually came from, first of all, my experience in advertising and my concern about how people gather their information and where they're at, because doing commercial advertising and then nonprofit advertising. And it was while I was doing commercial advertising that I did my first work for nonprofit campaigns. We worked with David Brower. We did the ad campaign that kept dams out of Grand Canyon. They were going to put dams in Grand Canyon. And Dave Brower, the Sierra Club, asked us to do ads opposing those dams, and we did, and it was a successful, very successful campaign. We stopped the dams. They haven't come back. And we did a series of ads for David Brower. This was in the 1960s, before you were born.
Yeah, way before.
And then after a while, I realized I really don't want to do commercial advertising anymore. I really only want to do this nonprofit stuff. And so that's when I dropped the commercial agency, closed it down, and started a nonprofit agency. Was that the question you asked?
Yeah, and then how did that affect you or lead you on to write your book?
So I spent every minute of every day thinking about how you communicate with people and how it works. And in the mid 1960s, television was for the first time becoming popular. Television really came along in a public way. In the late 1940s and 1950s, it was expanding. In the 1960s, by that time, almost everybody had a television set. And by the 1970s, people were really immersed in television. And I began to realize that their way of gathering information and understanding information was completely different now than it used to be. And it really bothered me a lot because I believe that print communications offer multidimensionality and enable people to bring their own creative thought process to it, whereas moving image media like television put the image in you, and then the next image, and the next image, and the next image, and the next image, and you never get away from it, so you always have to be accepting those images or else walk away from it. And in 1965, Marshall McLuhan wrote a book called The Medium is the Message. I really took that seriously. I read that book a number of times. And that the title of that book is very important because he was absolutely right, that the medium itself changes how you think of what the medium is saying and what information is moving into you. So I began to realize here I was doing advertising in print media, and my audiences were invariably watching television for 4 hours a day. Now it's much more than that. And everybody was doing that. So everybody was sitting there with their eyes open, images were pouring in, and once the image goes in, it never comes out. So I can ask anybody who was alive in those days for, Gossett used to have this little thing. He'd say, "How about he would name some image, popular image from the media,
Just to, like, regular
popular images from that period.
like cartoons or like
no public figures.
like
And
Rosie the Riveter and
Rose, exactly. He'd say, "Bring up. Do you have Rosie Riveter in your brain? Can you think of the Rosie Riveter?" And people always say, "Yes, of course." Or, "Did you know you had that in your brain? Can you now get rid of it? Erase it from your brain." And
Wow,
you can't erase it.
do
Once
it.
it's in, you can't erase it. It's there forever. So people are gathering 4 hours worth of images every day, none of which they can ever let go of. And in the meantime, they're not seeing other things or doing other things, and they're living in that image world which is pouring into them all the time.
That's so
And during that
scary.
period, we started seeing television personalities getting elected to office. I don't remember exactly when it happened, but Arnold Schwarzenegger got to be governor of California, and Jesse Ventura got to be governor of, was it Minnesota? And all kinds of public office was being held by celebrities for no reason other than their images had been completely implanted and people were very familiar with them. And now of course, we have Donald Trump,
Yeah.
and that's and I'm for Oprah running for president right now because I think she'll get elected if so. So I began to worry about the power of that medium that was not being recognized. And so I decided I would write a book to talk about all of the powers of television to enter the mind and dominate consciousness and blot out less invasive media. And it was the invasive media, is the less invasive media, which means that you participated in it more, like in reading. You interact with information when you're reading it. You go at your own speed. You're in control of the process. You create your own imagery. It's not sticking images into you. And I thought that I had to write it myself to figure it out myself. And so I decided to write a book about it.
Wow. When you wrote that book, did you ever at all imagine that today that it would turn into the mass amount of screens we have today and that they'd be
Well, it was already almost 100%, by the mid-1970s. I don't know if it was 100% of homes that had a television set, but it was a very large percent of the population. And people were watching for like 4 hours a day on the average. And in those days, there were the beginnings of other technological devices, but not much. It wasn't a big
no
factor.
phones or like
None of what we
yeah.
take for granted right now.
Yeah.
And so people were caught inside that, and I was very worried about it because I felt like the kind of work we were doing, where we're trying to talk about some terrible thing that's going on, the damming of Grand Canyon, or trying to put an SST into commercial production, or all the major issues of that period. People need to think about them and understand them, and you can't just do it through a bunch of images flying into the brain. And because you need people to engage and interact with it, and you don't interact with it when it goes into your brain like that. It just pours in, and you are it.
Just passive, just sitting there.
Yeah. The medium is the message. That was what McLuhan
Exactly.
first explained to me, and then I really got it because I was working in advertising, and I really got what he was saying. The medium is the message.
Were you ever on the other side of that? Like when you were in advertising trying to make the medium most compelling so that people would passively accept it, so you could like advertise?
Would passively accept it?
Yeah, advertise your products.
Well, fortunately, I joined into advertising. I was invited into advertising by a very famous, radical, progressive guy by the name of Howard Gossage. And he did commercial advertising, but he hated it. He always hated it. And always the kinds of ads he would do were very different from what other advertising people did.
How so?
Well, we did campaigns like we were hired to, he had Rover and Land Rover cars was one of the clients. So normally people will advertise cars by talking about how they're faster or smarter or they'll use less gas or whatever it is. He wanted to advertise that people should buy fewer cars and that Rover would sponsor the ads because we have too many cars on the road and it's causing environmental problems. It was the 1960s.
Wow.
And it was causing environmental problems. And Rover didn't like that. They said, no, we're not going to do that. And so then he advertised Rover with a car painting competition. We're a smaller car, so it's easier to paint, and so we'll give prizes to whoever can paint it fastest. That kind of stuff. Well, people were very amused by what he did, and so he got away with it. And then we got Scientific American as a client, Scientific American magazine.
Wow.
And because they were upset because not enough airlines were advertising in their pages, and they thought airlines ought to be advertising in their pages because it's Scientific American, intelligent people are reading the magazine and so on. So Gossage decided what we'll do for Scientific American is we'll have a paper airplane So the idea was to appeal to airline and aircraft manufacturing clients. That's who we were supposed to appeal to with the Scientific American. That's what Scientific American wanted us to do. So Gossage had the idea we'll have a first international paper airplane competition. Maybe the greatest new aircraft design can be folded into a little air thing and sent in to us, and we'll give them $5,000 if they win the contest. So we got like 25,000 entries with all paper airplanes, and we then did a book about it called The Great International. That's my bestseller, by the way.
Oh, yeah?
The Great International Paper Airplane book. It sold 2.5 million copies.
Wow.
And I did it together with Howard, and that was in the 1960s. And it was a big success, and the campaign was a big success. And that's the kind of typical campaign we did, but it was for commercial clients. We're always doing these weird campaigns for commercial clients. So Dave Brower of the Sierra Club wanted to keep the dams out of Grand Canyon. So he'd been following the way we work, and he really liked that. He thought it was very creative and interesting. So that's why he came to see us to do ads against the damming of Grand Canyon. And we got to know him, and I worked with him for 25 years after that. But Gossage was a very, very creative guy, but he was still in the commercial business. But he then died in 1969, and so I closed down the agency. I didn't want to do commercial stuff anymore. I just wanted to do nonprofit stuff. Was that the question you asked?
Yeah.
Oh.
Did you ever feel like before you stopped doing commercial stuff, did you ever notice that you were targeting audiences in a way that may have been like trying to hijack their attention, or like that, like ways so many commercial products do now, especially through television media?
Say that again, that question. I'm not sure what you mean.
Like, did you...
You're talking about the 1960s?
Yeah, like when you're in commercial advertising, did this thought ever occur to you that you were like, in a way, like using media to influence people and get people to buy into certain ways? Yeah,
of course. I mean, that's what you're doing, But we didn't use television. See, even then, we were the only ad agency in the world probably that would not do television ads. So because Gossage didn't like it and I didn't like it. And so we did print ads even then. But we would, of course, try to think of how to be influential in print media. But we didn't take the normal out. We didn't run these campaigns that are of the sort that run now with, beautiful women holding your product and talking about how it turns them on or something like that. So we didn't do any of that. We always had some parallel, like a paper airplane competition or a car painting competition. We always did something like that. We never did the regular commercial approach.
Do you think that your commercials were as effective without using digital media?
Well, there was no digital media at that point.
Or I mean, like television, like so many other companies.
Well, we weren't thinking about that.
Yeah.
We just felt we do what we feel good doing, and we think it'll work, and we're not into just, figuring out what'll get the, either the client likes it or it doesn't like it. Actually, most of the clients did like it.
Yeah.
They were entertained by it, and they'd get good reactions from the public for it because people liked it. And some of the campaign, the paper airplane competition was extremely popular. It made front page news in a lot of newspapers. And so Scientific American got a lot of attention, and they did appeal to the airplane manufacturers and the airlines and stuff that did increase their advertising. So it was actually a successful campaign, even from a commercial point of view. So we also worked for a radio company called KLH, which makes very high quality radios, and then we worked for a couple of clothing companies and things like that. But all the campaigns were of that kind. They didn't look like regular advertising.
What do you think of, like, as from having history as a advertiser? What do you think of the ways that technology companies today like program phones and devices to be like addictive and like hook people into like wanting them and wanting to be on them? Do you think there's any similarities between like advertising strategies companies use and like the phone products?
I have to tell you, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because I don't use those phones myself. So I don't really know what's on the phones. I do know that they'll use whatever they can to speak into your brain. But the main thing that they use is money. In other words, when we ran some of these political campaigns over the years against some corporation doing something that we didn't like, we'd have to spend like several $100,000 to get into the New York Times and the Washington Post or the Wall Street Journal. They would spend $25 million on the same issue. So we were always outspent by millions to one.
They being the television companies?
The people who are trying to sell something through any medium, even if it was print media or whatever it was, they were outspending you by unbelievable. Well, just take the figures of today, even today, the amount of commercial advertising right now today in the United States is something like $390 million a year. It must be around $400 million a year. Now, the amount of advertising space bought by nonprofit organizations is less than 100,000, or it's 150,000 or 200,000, depending whether anybody buys. Not many of them spend it at all. So you have a ratio of something like millions to one, 20 million to one ratio. So a corporation is speaking over and 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 over, and you get one shot. You get one shot to respond to it.
In all of that.
So you have to be really good, and you have to know how to speak through that into people's thoughts and awarenesses and get them turned on in some way. And so that's the advertising problem we faced.
Yeah.
And that is still faced today by organizations trying to argue their case, whether it's advertising or not, just in the media. It's just gigantic because corporations will buy 20 spots per day and do the same message over and over and over again. And you get to have one spot every year. You know what I'm saying? It's like that much of a ratio.
Wow.
So corporate speech is so dominant that it's very hard to fight it. So you have to be, first of all, very, very, very good at it. And secondly, you have to break through what I know you know is the kind of overpowering controls that are used by today's media. I mean, the inherent controls that are used by, just the fact that you're hooked to these devices And that's what you sit and receive all day long. It doesn't even matter what the content is. It's just that that's the relationship that you have.
Why do you think that is?
Well, that's best for you to answer because I'm, 82 years old. So I can't exactly, I've never been related to it. I don't care about it. I don't ever use it of any kind.
No need to.
And I do have a very, very, very old flip cell phone that I call my wife with every now and then. But that's about it. I don't use it for communication very much, and it doesn't really work. But I'm mystified by what I can only assume that people were very, very addicted to media in any case. So first it was television was the first one that was really overwhelming in its universality and the degree to which the average person was 4 or 5 hours per day on the average. That means half the population was watching more than 4 or 5 hours.
Now it's like 7 hours a day just on phones, I think.
And plus television, they also watch television.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
They also watch television, but television plus phones.
Yeah.
So it's all that time is being spent with images pouring in. Now on the phones, you do get to feed back a little bit. But the point is that you're on the receiving end of imagery. On television, you're just on the receiving end, period. You just take it in, and you cannot let go of it. Once it's in, you've got it. If I say Donald Trump, you cannot erase him from your mind. He's there. He's never not going to be there.
Yeah.
Ronald Reagan, I took in the 1970s. He's still there. You know what I'm saying? It's like they never go away. When you read a book, the images are your own creation. And when you're using print media, it's a entirely different process. You are a creative partner to the process of the words coming in. When you get these moving image media, television in particular is no possible. I don't really know how you handle imagery from your cell phones or your devices, how you handle them, but I do know, I guarantee you can't get rid of any of the images that go in.
No.
So you spend all day long, 7 hours, I don't know about you personally, but the average young person these days spends 6, 7 hours gathering imagery and also information.
Yeah, facts.
All day long from there. The facts probably can slide away a little bit because that's more of a literal. That's more literal.
Yeah.
But the imagery never slides away.
Yeah.
Never slides away. It's there forever. Whatever it is, it's amazing what we can absorb, actually, when you think about it.
Yeah.
But it's there forever, and it influences behavior from then on. You become more like it, like we do turn into the images that we gather. That's totally obvious, because it's like that's your worldview. And even back in the 70s and the 80s, when I was really thinking about television a lot, I was still doing print ads. I did print ads for another 20 years, and we continued to be successful doing print ads. That is to say, we could run campaigns that actually succeed. We did all the Planned Parenthood ads in the 1970s, for example, that preserved abortion rights and contraception and so on. Ronald Reagan wanted to eliminate it all, and we did, 100 ads over a 10-year period that talked about various aspects of it. That made a very, very big impression on people, and it was a big factor in beating it down. Now, of course, Donald Trump is doing it over again. Whatever Ronald Reagan didn't succeed in doing, Donald Trump is trying to do. Like I mentioned, the
That's
SST.
So true.
Ronald Reagan wanted to have a U.S. supersonic transport. We ran a campaign. We beat that. Had a big public response. Donald Trump wants to run it. Donald Trump. If Barack Obama did it, he's against it. If Ronald Reagan did it, he's for it. Period. That's all you need to know about Donald Trump.
Platform.
That's his whole platform. But anyway, what was I saying? Something about images.
Yeah, how you just can't.
So you're done in by your images. So you basically evolve into your images. I mean, you can say, "Oh no, I don't really want to do that. I don't want to," but you have to personally somehow consciously say, no, I don't want to do that, because the images that you see create an image field that you then start relating to.
Yeah, you bounce yourself off of it.
And meanwhile, this is what I started to say. Meanwhile, there's a world out there. There are birds and trees and forests and whales and creatures, and there's a natural process going on, and that's completely invisible. And it's no wonder to me that it's so easy to destroy the world now, because people don't know how to relate to it.
Yeah.
I mean, some people do, but they have to spend a lot of time doing it, and they can't get lost in their phones all the time.
Yeah.
So it's that's a gigantic transition from living in a world where nature is visible and part of your awareness, and you react to it, and you think about it, and you feel it, to spending that amount, some of the time that you would have done that with, now you're spending on television and these phones and these devices, which is strictly relating to technology. So you are turning into technology. You are literally becoming technology by absorbing it in that way. And you are becoming not natural at the same time. I mean, you're still a person, but you're not sensitive in the way that people used to be. And of course, I'm writing another book now called Against Anthropocentrism, and that has to do with anthropocentrism is the assumption of human superiority to everything else, to nature. And I am arguing that that's baloney, that we've just invented that idea in order to justify what we're doing to nature. And actually now, I just read a fantastic book called Mind in the Ocean, something like that, by Joan McIntyre. She was an activist in the 70s. I read that book years ago, but I just came across it again as I'm doing this work. Unbelievably brilliant. The human assumption about who's the most intelligent creature on the planet is that we are, because we have the biggest, most complex brain. But we don't have the biggest, most complex brain. There are lots of animals that have bigger and more complex brains. Whales have brains that are many times the size of humans.
Dolphins, too.
And dolphins and octopuses and elephants are the four main ones.
Oh, wow, elephants.
And elephants maybe not bigger. But the point is, people say, oh, well, it's a whale, so it has a big brain. It's the brain size relative to the body size is much bigger than humans, and it's much more convoluted, much more the result of thought processes, which is how you judge a brain. Dolphins, a little bit less, but almost the same. So whales are swimming around in water. That's all they do. They swim around in water. They're not building cars or starting wars or doing anything. So what are they thinking about? For 30 million years, they've been swimming around in the ocean, singing. They sing a lot. They have friends. They hang out with people, with other whales. They go and have a meal. And they spend 24 hours a day in an ocean. What are they thinking about? That's what I would like to know. What are the whales thinking about? They have bigger brains than we are. What are they using them for?
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be nice to know?
That would be amazing.
Dolphins, too. What are they thinking about? Now, we go and then we say we're superior to them. That's ridiculous. We have no idea. And it's obvious by our behavior that we don't know what we're doing. That's for sure. At least Americans don't. Maybe there may be some cultures, indigenous culture. I lived with Iroquois for many years. They knew what they were doing, and they were very controlled about what they did. It was very strict limits, very strict consciousness. Very, very interesting. I've written about them a little bit. I don't know if you've seen any of those.
Read your thing.
And that was a great experience. So we don't know what we're doing, and we don't know who we are, and we don't know anything about ourselves or what the planet is about. And the more we're enveloped by these devices, the more we're submerged by them, the less aware we are of the alternative systems that still exist. They're hanging on, but they may not be around. I read somewhere that whales may be killed off in the next 40, 50 years. It might be over.
No way.
Their population is so far down. We don't even know what they've been doing all these years. What are they thinking? That would be the project I'd like to see
That would be incredible.
develop.
Oh, my goodness.
The brains, so what are they thinking about?
Yeah.
Dolphins, too.
Yeah.
And octopuses, they're just beginning to realize how smart octopuses are. And slightly less so elephants. Anyway, I'm not answering your questions
No,
properly.
that was amazing.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. I had no idea that the whales. I knew dolphins were so much smarter than humans, but I didn't
Well, they
know
have
about
bigger brain.
whales
We
too.
can't even say what
Yeah,
we mean by
smarter is
that,
relative,
but we do know that by the standards that we use to measure intelligence capabilities, we're outgunned by at least 4 creatures.
yeah,
At least 3.
I wouldn't be surprised if there's more.
I'm sure there
too.
are more. We just don't know who they are yet.
Yeah,
I'm sure there are.
yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. When you were talking about your book, you mentioned that it affects the psychology and like changes family relationships, or TV and media changes family relationships and affects like psychology and passivity of people, and their understandings of nature. Could you talk a little bit more about like what you've seen, or if you've seen anything about like family dynamics or interpersonal relationships?
Well, I think that watching television had a little bit of community involved. Usually, people watched with some other member of their family. So there was a little bit of talking to somebody else. Now, I don't use these devices, so I don't know if you're sitting in a room with other people using devices and you're discussing what you see. But usually, probably, you're just experiencing the exchange that's happening between you and the device. The expression of the device and the person or forces that are sending the information. So your relationship is outside yourself and outside a family or community relationship. It may be part of a community in the sense that maybe you're getting the same message as your friend down the block from your computer. And so you could call that community too, but the point of the interpersonal quality of it, I think, is, you know better than I do the answer to
No,
this
it's
question.
so true.
But I'm saying, asking me this question, I don't do this at all.
Oh, I just want to hear about like what you were.
But my
meant by
first
that.
impulse in answering that
Yeah.
is, I can only say that it looks to me like there is still community, but it's community. It's sort of ephemeral community. It's sort of wavelength community. I don't know how to put it, but it's images being exchanged among people. But what else is being exchanged? What else is it improving your relationship with people? Do you get close? Is there more love involved? Is there more more info that's moving back and forth between? Maybe there's something that's increasing that may be pleasant or beneficial. But what's being lost? That's the real thing to ask. What's gained and what's lost? And my instinct, just judging the way people walk around with those things, you can't walk on the street anymore without bumping into somebody on one of those phones. I'm the only one walking down the sidewalk without looking at a handheld device of some kind. I have to step out of people's way very often, but they have a way of watching you at the same time. It's like, but it's another world now. It's a different world.
Yeah.
Now, not every country is like that right now, but it looks like they're going to be. And I think the quality of communication among humans, there's still communication, but the quality of the kind of communication is different. So we have to somehow inspect the details of that difference, what's gained and what's lost. You may get more stuff coming in, and maybe people are doing entertaining things, or you're hearing entertaining thoughts. I accept that may be happening. But what are you paying for it? What's going out at the same time? And what else is being lost? And I have a feeling there's a net loss from what I can see, and that if we're going to be human beings and want to express being more human, using to our whole capacities to a greater degree and in a more satisfactory way, then we have to be open to a lot of other stuff than that. And it's tragic to me the degree to which people in general, younger people in particular, have bought into an immersion without knowing the ultimate consequences of it. And
Yeah.
to me, it looks like it's a negative trip. And it's taking people away, I think, from awareness of the bigger picture of life on Earth, that we are just animals like all the other animals. We're only going to live a little while, and we can do something about making a better condition out of the situation, but we've got to actively do that. And
Mm-hmm.
the and the and the and these devices could be helpful for part of that, because that's the way everybody's communicating now.
Yeah.
But what's sacrificed as in the process?
A lot.
That's the way I think about it.
I mean, yeah, I completely agree. Like, I use my phone to stay in touch with people from previous trips I've gone on that live like across the country, across the world, and like I use that as like a way of staying in touch. But I still agree with everything you're saying. Like, it's nothing compared to face communication, and
Yeah,
there's so much. Like, if I go on my phone to text my friend who lives in, I don't know, Michigan or something, there's 7 other things I end up doing, getting lost on Instagram and photos, and other people are texting me. Like, it's not a one time thing. Like, you're either on or you just have to avoid it at all costs. But
yeah. I mean, I do not argue that there's not benefits to it. It's just that I think it's one of those things that's like you take a bite out of some delicious thing, and then you start eating it all day long every day.
mm-hmm.
It's not good, you know.
Sugar, yeah.
So it's moved life inside another framework, and I think the framework is negative
Mm-hmm.
myself. That's my general feeling, and I know you agree with me on it. So,
What do you think would be like the ideal world if do you think the ideal would be to just get rid of technology altogether
well,
for
you can't really get
all
rid of technology altogether. I mean, what's technology is also
I
just.
mean like digital, like screens, just screens in general.
I'd be okay with it. If I was Donald Trump, or if I was president of the world and could set rules, I'd probably dump the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I'd say we have to start a new campaign of re-experiencing life in some other way, and re-experiencing other life, re-experiencing the larger framework of life, getting real about what's going on right now, because there's no real, right now people are just lost in terms of understanding what's happening right now. I mean, this whole thing is going down the toilet right now in front of our eyes, and we're not really, there's not enough panic about that. There's not enough action about that, and it's just getting worse and worse and worse, and the powers that be are into it, getting it worse and worse and worse. They don't even understand what they're talking about. So I know you know all that, and maybe your friends know all that, but how can we, is digital communication the way to reverse that? Perhaps it would be helpful to somehow start a campaign within digital communications. I don't know enough about digital to even know that, but I do know that we've separated ourselves to such a degree from other life forms, from nature, from time, from all the other things that are around, that it's just an immense task to try to reverse the process now. But getting rid of all this stuff, I mean, I would say that would be a positive thing, to just ban it. I mean, it's probably an impossible thing, but you asked the question. So if I were in charge, I probably would try to
Yeah.
get rid of it, because I see it as a net loss, not a net gain.
Mm-hmm.
For for the world, definitely. For human beings, I think so. And for us personally, I'm pretty sure that it's a net loss, that people would be generally experiencing life in a more positive, happy way,
Mm-hmm.
feel more engaged. I mean, not right now engaged, you're still engaged, but the
Mm,
engagement is via the machine to such a degree.
they're engaged I mean, like, just from what I see and what I experience as a avid phone user, like, I'm engaged with my phone a lot and with the people on the other side of my phone, but for every second that I'm engaged with someone on my phone, there's 15 other people around me, like on the bus or at school, that I'm not engaging with. So, I mean,
Yeah.
it depends what you're
Well, it's a
looking
it's
for.
a changeover. It's a switch over, and I also think another thing about that is you've described it very well. So when life is reduced to exchanges with the machine, and then you still have friends that you then see sometimes, but you see them probably less than you might otherwise, and the context in which you see them is so related to the machine that you just communicated through, rather than your personal, physical, psychological, mental exchange, emotional exchange that would ordinarily happen if you were just two humans together on an island somewhere, or 10 humans on an island. It's so different that where does one lead and where does the other lead? And I take the other one. I'll vote for that one because I think too much has been lost in human relations. I don't know how to judge that. I don't know what measurements to use about that, but my guess is,
Yeah.
my assumption is, my observation is that everything is getting much more alienated, even among people, and definitely in terms of the human relationship to the world, it's definitely getting more alienated and more tragic.
Yeah.
And that's accelerating very fast.
Wow. That's so scary to think about. But it's so true. Um, well, it looks like we're almost ready to wrap up.
Okay.
But for just our last question, as I don't for better or for worse, I don't foresee digital technology being obliviated anytime soon.
Being what?
Being obliviated anytime soon.
I don't either.
Which could be a good thing or a bad thing. I don't know. You decide. But do you have any tips for our listeners of how to maybe live a more balanced life, or ways to use digital technology in a way that might be more beneficial than
Well,
consequential?
you're asking somebody who doesn't use digital technology at all how we could use it better. So I mean, I'm an ignorant person.
I mean,
about it.
just from like an outsider's point of view, like
Yeah.
watching people walk by on their phones every day.
I think that if by some way we can educate people to understand that they should ration their use, they should use it only between 3 and 5 every day, let's say, for example. Then they can indulge it from between 3 and 5. But I'm no authority on this, and I haven't even thought about it very much,
That's
about
okay.
how we can ration the use so that it's not as dominant. There's something about the engagement with that technology that pulls you in more and more and more, and gives pleasure to some degree more and more and more. Otherwise,
Yeah,
people wouldn't be
it's
watching it.
addicting.
It's addicting. It's very much like a drug,
It is.
and
Yeah.
so it pulls you in, and then I don't know. You have to ask people your age. Do they feel it's like a drug? Do they
I
feel?
feel it's like a
What do
drug.
your friends?
I mean,
Well,
I've talked to many of them. They've
yeah.
definitely said it's very addicting, and there's been tons of studies that show that it activates your reward pathway, the same one that all drugs do, and it's definitely
Well, then
crazy.
you're the person to lead the movement. I think you are already doing that. But it's hard for me to say how to break a relationship with something I don't even understand why
Yeah.
people are related to. It's like I mean, I have occasionally borrowed phone of my sons or something like that and tried to figure out how to work them and send a message or two. And to me, it feels the process feels alien to me.
It is. It's crazy.
And
It's like a sci-fi movie.
and I think as I say, I think the main work that has to be done is to get people to appreciate what's being lost and what's being sacrificed in order to do that, and the importance of that. I mean, if you have children, you better be worried about that because it's things are getting very, very, very serious now on the planet, and it's not going to get better unless there's a drastic, tremendous change. I mean, you have the ice caps melting now. The oceans are going to rise, temperatures booming. This is very serious. A lot of species are dying. Whales are going to be gone pretty soon. Smart. We should ask the whales.
We should ask the whales.
That's a good one. Let's ask the whales. They would just laugh us off.
You ridiculous people. Well, that's a wrap, folks. Hope you learned something new from today's episode. If you like this episode, please help spread awareness by liking, commenting, and telling others. For regular updates on the latest research, good reads, my personal encounters with screens, silly comics, stories, and more, head on over to my website at devicesdivide.org. And if you think you know someone, maybe a screenager, a parent, a teacher, a professional who may be a good fit for this podcast, feel free to shoot me an email at thedevicedivide@gmail.com.